Thank you for choosing this session in the late afternoon after a long day. And of course, we hope it will be a great choice for you. My name is Ger Driessen. I work with the New Spring as Learning Innovation Leader. And I have the privilege to chair this session this afternoon. And we have two speakers here, of which the first is Jane Hart. And Jane, please come over. Jane is from the Center of Learning and Performance Technologies, well known. And she will start with sharing some of her ideas, insights, tips related to 21st century learning. After that, we have our other speaker, Mr. Sunder Ramachandran. Please come over. He's the General Manager of Training at GlaxoSmithKline. The format of the session will be that they will give you input, share their ideas, and then there will be some 21st century learning going on in this room. For that you need a pen and you need a card. The cards are on the table. Not sure if there are enough pens, but we will check before we start the exercise. So, please give them a round of applause and then Jane will kick off.
Thank you very much. Now, I've got 15 minutes to talk about modern workplace learning. Now, if any of you have heard me speak before or know my work, that's a big ask. So I've restricted it to 5 or 6 slides, keep me focused. And at the end, hopefully, if you're interested to look further, I'll give you a link to go into it in more detail. So the purpose of my little piece today is to talk to you about how I see things are changing in the workplace and what that means for learning and development in particular. And I want to share with you a framework that I've been using with organizations around the world in order to help them rethink their approach to workplace learning. And as I said, I call that modern workplace learning. So as I'm sure you're all aware, there's so many different forces happening outside of the world of work that are impacting on the way we work and the way we learn. A lot of it is focused around things like AI and robotics, how that's going to change jobs. And I think that is important, but for me there are some other things, other factors that are really influencing the way we need to think about this. The first is that information is exploding exponentially. Some research suggests that by next year, 2020, knowledge, if you like, will be doubling every 12 hours. So just to keep up with new ideas, new thinking is going to be an enormous exercise activity. But more than that, we're seeing that the shelf life of knowledge is decreasing. And some skills, it's said, will be out of date within 18 months. So again, that's huge implications for people working in organizations. And furthermore, we're all living longer, we're all working longer, and there's no such thing anymore as a job for life, only a life of jobs. And together this means that there are huge implications for individuals and organizations on how we're going to keep up in this new world of work. And for me, one of the factors that really is important in all this is that everybody needs to be continuously learning. Not continuously being educated or continuously being trained, but continuously learning. So I want to look at what that means for individuals and organizations. And it's quite clear now that many individuals do recognize that continuous learning is a very important part of how they work and do have their lives. And many studies are showing now that the modern learner, if you like, is very interested in continuous learning. Now, many of you might know that for the last 12 years, I've been running an activity called the Top 100 Tools for Learning. You put your hand up if you've heard about this. Okay, so for those who haven't, for 12 years then, I've been asking learning professionals around the world to nominate their top 10 tools for learning, out of which I generated the top 100 tools for learning, and from 2016, the top 200 tools for learning. And people, as they nominate their tools, also say how they're using the tools. And this, for me, has been a very important study over those 12 years to show how learning behavior, if you like, is changing. Here is the top 200 tools for learning 2018. And in the middle, you'll see the top 10 tools for learning, which, if you look at them, you can see that actually none of them are training tools. They're all quite commonplace web tools. So over the years, as I said, I've tried to track the way individuals are learning. And from this, and from the ways they're telling me how they are using these tools, I can identify a number of different features. And for me, what I'm seeing is that the modern professional now learns in many, many different ways, both inside and outside the organization, intermittently, as well as very regularly. In other words, they're not just taking classroom training or e-learning or going on conferences or web courses from time to time. They're making use of web resources and internal resources on a regular basis. And they're also very regularly, perhaps even daily, receiving a flow of information, of new content, as well as interacting with their professional networks, their PLN, as some people call it, their personal learning networks. And within the workplace, they're learning by just doing their job, by interacting with their team and colleagues, as well as when getting guidance from their managers. So learning for the modern professional is not just formal stuff. It's about learning from all experiences that they have every day in many different places. And we can also see that they learn for many different reasons. Perhaps at work, they're learning to be compliant or conformant with organizational practices, or perhaps to acquire a new body of skills. But they're also learning to solve problems, as well as to keep up to date with their industry and profession, and just to continuously improve through the work they do. So for me, then, learning is not just about training, and I think that really is the key to think about here. We've for so long now sort of equated learning with training or education that we've forgotten that we learn in so many other ways. And particularly with the learning profession, we've focused on these bottom activities here, particularly delivering, managing classroom training and designing e-learning, when we can see that our individuals learn in many different ways. And, sorry, I shouldn't click through this quite so quickly. One of the things I've also asked people to do was identify which of these things bring the most value to them. I've asked another survey I've been running since 2010. I've said, which of these are the most essential or not essential for you? I'll show you the results in a minute if you didn't actually see them, but just have a moment, pause and think there. Which of these ways of learning bring the most value to you? To you, not to your organization, okay, to you personally. Okay, well, I'll show you the results now. And what I did was I ranked them according to the scores that they got from very important and essential. So this is from the top down to the bottom. And I think you can see quite clearly at the top, the ways that people prefer or find the most value are things like daily work experiences, knowledge sharing with teams, web search, manager guidance. And look what's right down at the bottom here. Now, when I show this slide to people, particularly learning people, they say, what we have to do is do better down here. We have to modernize what we're doing. We have to improve and make it more engaging. I think that's true, but I think it's much more than that. I don't think it's just about modernizing training and providing it in more engaging ways. I think we need to think about this bigger picture. We need to think about how we can rethink this whole model of workplace learning. Well, what about all the other ways of learning that people find so valuable that we don't really have any influence in? How can we support that and enable that? The other thing I think is important is that as learning is seen to be such a much wider concept than before, it can no longer be the sole responsibility of the Learning and Development Department to support it. It's now up to everybody in the organization to support it, to enable it. It's up to every individual to take control of their own learning and to be supported by managers and individuals, which is quite a new way of thinking because, as we know, many managers, they have what they think is a learning or training problem. They just phone up L&D and say, sort it out for me. I think now we need to start rethinking the way that we're supporting learning in this whole area. So I wanted to share with you a framework that I've been using with organizations around the world, how to rethink that model and some of the aspects of it. So for me, in the center of this model lies every individual who has a responsibility for their own self-improvement and self-learning and self-development. After all, in this new world of work, remember, they can no longer rely on the fact that they'll be in the organization for the rest of their lives. They're probably going to need to keep constantly upskilling, acquiring new knowledge, and in order to get the next job. Organizations won't necessarily prepare them for the next job. And that might mean going outside of the organization or whether it's staying inside the organization. You know, this person here in the middle, I've not called it a learner either, you notice. I try not to use that term because once you start talking about learners, people have this immediate response. They're thinking about student or trainee or something. So for me, I talk about individuals or employees or workers, something like that, in order to them to understand that the way that they are learning is just part of everyday life, of everyday work. It's not a separate activity that they go to do in some separate place. Okay, that might happen when they take some training or go on a web course or whatever, but in the majority of the time they're working. That's their primary role. And for me, it's about supporting those individuals, those workers, as they work and learn. And again, not in those very traditional formal ways. So for me, one of the important ways we can do that, for sure, is that we can modernize our approach to training. That's absolutely going to be a key part of it all, but it's not going to be the whole part. We've seen interest in creating resources for performance support and so forth. Yes, that's good. We can do that. We can also provide some daily content to feed their daily habit of learning. But that is still kind of spoon-feeding them stuff. I know we've always done that. We've always spoon-fed them content, and they just sit there and passively ingest it or consume it. So I think rather than just creating content, there's really a big part we can play in helping to promote a continuous independent learning approach. And that really means supporting them, helping them to build what I call a modern daily learning habit. To spend, like, say, 20 minutes a day just to do something small, whether it be reading something or listening to something or interacting with the people in the network. Over time, that will add up to something substantial. 20 minutes a day adds up to a couple of hours a week, over a month, a couple of good few hours, and maybe 100 hours over a year, which is equivalent to about 10 days training or something like that. Just doing a little bit every day. And pretty much that's the way that I've learned, if you like, over the last 10 more years just connecting with my network or reading something, a blog post here, an article there. I've built a huge knowledge, a body of knowledge, and I probably couldn't come and stand here and talk to you if I hadn't have done that. But that, of course, requires new skills. And what we need to do is help to build those skills, not necessarily just pump them with new stuff. Okay, that could be part of it, but build the skills so they can go and do this for themselves, so they can support this new habit of learning. And we can also help them identify some of the external events and things that they can, might find useful, rather than thinking we have to provide everything internally for them. And even start to run some more activities ourselves, more informally, to kind of, for them to see that learning is not something that's just something done in a classroom or for conformance or compliance. So this is quite an important key area of work, I think. Now, some organizations, can do this or are doing this very informally. They're just supporting individuals to do this and helping them see them and expose them to new ideas and helping to build skills. Others prefer to take a more formal process of professional self-development, give them some time and help them set goals that meet both organization and individual needs, and then help them to manage this stuff themselves and evidence their new performance. So it's not about the organization necessarily tracking it all internally. It's about helping individuals do things for themselves, build a portfolio of experience, knowledge, experiences, and new performance that they can take with them. Or, more likely and probably more interestingly, to help them get a promotion within work. So that's really a key part for me. And of course, another big piece, which really we haven't touched on before, is to start working with managers and supporting them, helping them to build their own team, helping them to see the value of this daily learning, perhaps even to give time to their team to do something. And just today I heard about some organization that's giving their team like 20%, a small percentage of their working day to do that, because the manager recognizes how important it is that they're continuously learning, and then they share what they learn with their team, and together they grow. And then, of course, supporting managers perhaps to do more for themselves, to develop their team, not necessarily taking people out of their job, providing more on-the-job training or other job-based activities, special activities or stretch assignments or whatever it is, to do things more as they work, learning from their work, learning experientially as they work. So for me, these are the three key new strands of work that I'm working on. As I say, for organizations around the world, they're not perhaps doing all of this, but they're taking some of these strands and starting to build out their new world of work and their new ways of learning. So if you're thinking here, where on earth do I start? How do I even start to get this going in my organization? I think it's about changing this whole mindset about what learning is all about. It's not just taking it away from a manager or an individual and forcing stuff down their throats. But to do that, you first need to be a role model yourself. You need to be modeling this whole new modern professional. You need to be having a daily learning habit, doing things much more for yourself. You need to help the managers understand the economic imperative of it all. It's not just training people from time to time. It's about supporting their ongoing learning and their continuous learning from their own perspectives, not from stuff that we just give them to do. And then, of course, it's about identifying the managers who want to do things differently. I say to people, don't bang your head against a brick wall trying to make managers do this if they don't want to do it. Find the ones that do, because they do exist out there. In every organization, there are managers who realize that the old ways of working and learning are not perhaps achieving the results they want. And then one very practical way of going forward is to promote this whole concept of learnability. By that, I mean the sort of ability or the learning agility to keep learning, be curious, constantly want to learn. And some organizations are already doing this. Google, for instance, when they recruit, they look for learning animals, people who are constantly learning. Not for people who can just do the job now, but people who will learn to do the job for the future. And then once they've got them there, then of course they need to support them. They need to nurture that learnability. So it's no good bringing them in and then just making them be trained all the time. It's about supporting that whole continuous approach, independent approach to learning, and then rewarding it. So I've said a lot, I think, in a few minutes. If it's intrigued you, then perhaps you'd like to read more. And I've written quite a lot of stuff. And this last thing, if you want to go to this resource here, there's a whole online resource called Modern Workplace Learning 2019. And the first chapter, pretty much what I've just said now, plus a lot more, is there for you to read online free. So I don't know how long that took, maybe more than 15 minutes. But,
a little bit more. Thank you
sorry,
so much.
OK, thank you very much.
OK, thank you, Jane. Applause. Yeah, thank you. And really nice that Sunder will take over. They work together, and Sunder will explain something about it. And what's really nice of having Sunder here is that he represents the emerging market. So Sunder is from India, and so it's very nice that he can also share his point of view from that side of the globe today. Sunder.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So, just to give you a reference point in terms of what I'm responsible for and where I come from, I work for GlaxoSmithKline, and I work in the emerging markets business, which is essentially the big countries like India, China, Brazil, but also the smaller clusters in Middle East, North Africa. And essentially, 21st century learning or modern workplace learning for us is the way we operate and the way we work, because we've got 15,000 people in this region. Most of them are commercial colleagues, which means they're out in the markets, don't necessarily work in an office environment. So we really have to walk the talk to really embed capability and learning with an employee cluster of this nature. So this is 2015, a Wall Street Journal article, and coincidentally, right after this came out, I was actually speaking at LT, I think this was Feb 2016, about this article, right? And this is about how healthcare, which is the business in which I work in, actually is getting embedded into your mobile phone. So the future of medicine is in your smartphone. It was quite a viral article just about 4 years back. And this wasn't some futuristic study. This was here and now at that point in time. Already there were mobile applications that were actually getting prescribed for patient adherence across the world. So this was real back then. This is last month, and this is the cover of National Geographic, and this is what it said. And this has been quite popular as it came out. The future of medicine is actually the microengineered chip in your body. This isn't also futuristic. This is now. It's already happening in many therapy areas, and I'm sure many of us have read these narratives across leading publications. Now, the reason I bring out those two slides, 4 years back, which is the future of healthcare in your phone, to today, when we're talking about a micro-embedded chip in your body, is this is how much the business has moved in a 4-year time frame. Now, if you just suppose that on learning and where are we and what is the pace at which we're moving, we were talking about mobile learning already in 2015, and in 4 years, how much have we still moved? And a reflection of that is we're still talking about mobile learning and micro-learning and all of that 4 years hence. So I think it's an opportunity for us to sort of just take a pause and reflect, are we moving at the pace at which businesses that we support are moving? Because frankly, they're going to move anyway, with or without us. So the opportunity is for us to sort of make sure that we stay aligned. Now, these are some of the challenges that we try and solve for in the regions in which we operate. Give me a show of hand if any of these talk to you, depending on the context in which you are. Does that resonate with the models in which you operate? Fantastic. So while you have these challenges, I think the key question that we are always trying to answer is proficiency. Are my 14,000 people getting better at what they do on a day-to-day basis? And that's the question I want to find an answer to for the businesses that I support. It's not about, I think people are agnostic now of how much time we are spending training them in the classroom, e-learning or enablement, mobile, or what have you. I think the only question that matters is my colleague more proficient today than what she was yesterday? And if you can answer that question, then obviously they're learning. And they're agnostic of the mechanisms that you're using to answer those. Now, obviously, in learning, context drives content. Now, we all know that. These are just some pictures of the typical day in the life of a sales colleague. I mean, these are some pictures from the country in which I'm based in India, but this could be an example from China or Brazil or any of our emerging markets. Now, if that's the person who's sitting out there with a backpack outside the clinic of a practitioner, a healthcare practitioner, who they're going to go and make a sales pitch to so that they can prescribe our drugs, and that's what they do every day in the markets, what type of content and what type of learning will really fuel their performance? Now, when I ask this question, often the answer is micro-learning, just-in-time, nuggets, and so on and so forth. Well, that's really one part of the answer. That's the part of the answer which is what type of content asset is best suited for this situation. When you have an employee on the move in a market scenario, and it could be any industry, if you will, because this applies to a lot of the other businesses as well. But the important question also to answer is, what should be the nature of that content? And if you look at this image, clearly, the only reason this colleague of mine is going to look at that content is if it has an element of immediacy. If she can actually have a look at a quick video, and if that's going to make a difference to the conversation she's going to have with the customer, I've got her hooked. But if that's not the case, it's just some generic 2-minute micro-learning, some nice-to-know things, they don't care. So when we talk about, do we know what does the day in the life of your colleague looks like, we need to spend time landscaping what are they doing. And when I say landscaping, I mean a real visceral understanding of what does that day look like, and not just a superficial understanding to say, well, my colleagues are out in the market meeting customers. That doesn't cut. Do we know what do they do on a day-to-day basis? Do we know what systems do they interact with on a day-to-day basis? Now, clearly, at least in our business, it's not the learning management system. It certainly is the customer relationship management software. So if CRM is what they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis, then should you be thinking of that as a place to start your modern workplace learning or embedding learning in the workflow versus trying to build that around your learning management system, which is not where your user is? I think those are questions that we need to answer. And again, I think the single most important question is, how are people getting proficient? And what mechanics do you have within your enterprise to actually report on this? And obviously, we're at learning technology, so there's a lot of talk about learning analytics and big data. You can get all of that from your learning management systems, but are you really able to produce dashboards that report on proficiency or capability indexed, or people just getting smarter, better in whatever it is that they're expected to do in their job roles? Now, with this in mind, like I said, we've got a large workforce spread across a bunch of different countries. The first thing we did in the region in which I operate is we said we'll institutionalize the hardware, right? And that's an easy step to do, capital intensive, but you can sort of P&L it out over a period of time. And we said, we don't want to deal with a scenario where everyone uses different devices, because then that creates a little bit of complexity from a design standpoint, although you do have now responsive design and things like that. But we said we're going to give everyone a company-provided iPad, so we know everyone has access to the same hardware ecosystem. And that's the device people are going to use to learn, perform, and report. And the first one is not something that people were doing every day, and that was our goal. Every commercial colleague performs every day, which is the act of going and meeting customers, using marketing collaterals, and making a pitch. They report all of their activities on CRM, which I'm sure is true in your business as well. But I don't necessarily think they are learning in a structured fashion on a daily basis, and that's the element that we wanted to embed. And we said mobile is a great way to do it, but as we got onto the whole journey of what type of mobile enablement, what sort of mobile learning should we be doing, we actually identified specific use cases and said there's so much you could do with mobile. what are we going to cherry pick? What are we going to start with? And what you see with the imagery of a mobile on the right are the areas we said we're going to build a use case around micro-learning, social, gamification, analytics. So that was on the table. That's what we're going to double down on and build a use case around, right? Because if you try and do everything, you're often going to go wrong. So you don't see HTML5. So in our mobile learning applications, we do not push any form of SCORM or e-learning content. Everything is just-in-time content that a user would find value in their flow of work, not some knowledge management type of content. It's not good enough if you're just pushing an SOP or a PDF document that has no relevance in terms of the immediacy of their workflow. It's never going to be seen. Now, we've been hearing a lot of talk about building better learning platforms, building better learning technology. I think there's also a case for building better learners, right? So what are you going to, and obviously it's not an either or. You got to build better learning technology, and you also got to build better learners. Now, easier said than done. I think a good place to start is to actually turn your learning teams into better learners, into evangelists who understand what walking the talk means. And we actually partnered with Jane to this effect. So we worked with Jane and we ran workshops for my entire team just to enable them to get their hands around what does this modern workplace learning really mean. As an example, what does community management mean? Now, it's not something that it's intuitive. It's not something that every L&D manager intuitively understands. What does that mean tactically? If you had an individual in your team who had community management as their job spec, what would be the KPIs? What would you measure them on? What would good look like? I mean, these are real questions that we have to answer within an enterprise. If you have an experienced designer, if you have a micro-learning specialist, what would good look like? So unless you're actually able to define in a very tactical way, what is this individual going to do? How are you going to measure? You're not necessarily going to make a lot of progress. So the first step was to really get people together in the team and get them to experience. And the way we did this is, we collaborated with Jane in an online environment. And this wasn't training, virtual or otherwise. This was just people experiencing what community management looks like. Trainers actually experiencing how you create quick and dirty videos that can actually meet the demands of sales colleagues at a point in time, right? Because I always say these are things that are easy to learn and difficult to teach. So if you try and build a module around this, it'll be quite difficult. But if you get people in an environment when they're doing it themselves, I think they build a better sense of appreciation for what this means for themselves and then for larger teams. And as a result of this, we actually then were able to create our own internal sales readiness platform. And long story short, what we're able to do today, and this is our sort of a modern learning architecture, is this is a mobile app-based readiness platform. And we're able to do 3 simple things, which are very important for us in the workflow. Number 1, in our business, it's very important that you always have the license to sell, i.e., you are certified on the pieces of knowledge, you're certified on what you have in terms of drugs and reports that you're going to talk with your doctors about. So we used to run 2 knowledge certifications each year, but with our readiness platform, we now run a knowledge certification every month because it's mobile, it's quick, it takes 20 minutes, and we're now able to get 12 different data points on a sales or a marketing colleague over the course of an year. And this also gives us the flexibility to keep changing, keep evolving as new competition comes in, as the market ecosystem changes, customer demands change. So we're able to sort of respond and make sure that people are up to speed and they have a license to sell, if you will. So that's the knowledge part. Obviously, it's gamified. It's got all of the other bells and whistles that you'd expect with a modern knowledge assessment. But that's that. And then we actually were able to incorporate video-based simulations because for salespeople, it's not enough to know what you are going to sell. It's really important for you to be able to articulate that in front of a customer. So what we were able to do was actually create a small video simulation software within the app. And what it does is gives me the ability from the back end to push out a case scenario to a colleague saying, you're going to meet customer X. This is their past behavior. This is their belief system. What are you going to tell them? And tell this to them in 2 minutes. So almost deliver an elevator pitch, if you will, to this customer about the product that you're going to talk to them about. And what they're going to do is they get the case, they get a notification on their mobile phone, they can record their video pitch. And again, this technology is actually quite commoditized now. You will see this with a lot of providers in the exhibition area. But the smart thing that we were able to pull off was actually put a workflow in the back end. So when the sales colleague records the video pitch and submits it on the app, it actually goes back to their line manager. So a notification pops up for the line manager. They can watch this colleague's video and actually give a rating and give some qualitative feedback saying, you got to do this better, or why don't you try again? And they can keep pitching till they get it right. So we called it pitch perfect, which is how do you keep perfecting your sales pitch. This is one use case. But then we use the same thing in our managerial skill training as well. So we've just got off a performance appraisal cycle, and we wanted to coach our people, how do you have difficult conversations, especially when you're communicating the outcome of the performance appraisal. So we built case scenarios for managers. It's one way. It's not like a role play that you could potentially do in a workplace scenario, but what it does is it allows you to calibrate people on what's the right language to use when you get into conversations of this nature. And then the manager records actually a video on their phone to say, here's how I'm going to talk to this employee under these circumstances, in this case scenario, and their line manager can give them some feedback and say, hey, could you add a little more empathy? It could be as simple as that. Or, hey, don't use that language because that doesn't align to our values as an enterprise. So just some use cases of how you could use video simulations in the workplace. And then the last, when you have colleagues in the market, you always have managers going and visiting them every month or two. And when they visit, they're obviously doing real observations. All of this is online, simulated. But that's the only opportunity where a manager watches a sales rep in a market with a real customer. And obviously, they have some observations in terms of how they're doing. And we incorporated what we call a coaching checklist, and it could be any other type of checklist, onto the app as well. So what we're able to get now is we're able to combine, and these 3 activities happen every month for every rep. We're actually able to bring this all together, and we have a simple algorithm running in the back end. Knowledge check, skill check in a simulated environment, skill check in a real environment, and we call this sales readiness. So what we're able to do now for 14,000 people across the region is get a single capability index, which we call the sales readiness index. And then we can slice and dice based on countries, regions, business units, and draw correlations. So if you have a region that's delivering low commercial outcomes, one of the places that we want to look at, we want to do a quick health check on what is the sales capability index of people operating in that region. Is it a knowledge gap? Is it an articulation gap? Is it a discipline issue? People have the knowledge, they know how to sell, but they're not doing something right in the actual marketplace. And you can be very targeted in terms of the approaches that you take. So here's an example of, just an example of, and that allows us the flexibility to put out some very basic, this isn't even any big data, this is very basic data analytics that you could do on the back of an Excel sheet actually, but you're able to be very targeted, draw the correlation, and then invest energy on learning where it really matters. And even those investments are actually all online. So if people are lacking the ability to articulate the value proposition, we can really double down on how much of time we spend on pitching practice. And if it's an on-job issue, then we can really double down on coaching and creating toolkits for managers. So that's what we've been able to do, and that's an example of our response, and to what Jane said earlier, our response to the learning ecosystem as we see it today, but also a real use case of how, as a large enterprise, you can actually do it in the context of business to impact commercial outcomes. So I think as you go back, takeaways, as you start your own journey, and I'm sure some of you may already be at different stages within the journey, in my mind, you got to know what are the right questions to ask. Have you figured out what the day in the life of your colleague that you want to impact looks like? How are you going to gain momentum? So obviously the whole idea around marketing and making sure initiatives land, and how are you going to go about getting executive buy-in? So you can't be, none of this can be happenstance. I think this has to be by design, so you've got to be thoughtful about all of these. So that's where you'll find me on Twitter, and look forward to a dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunder. Okay, thank you very much. And that was the spoon-feeding part of this session. But what we have learned is that we also need other parts. So that will be the next part of the session. And you need a card that's on the table, a card like this. There must be enough, and you need a pen to write. So if there are not enough on your table, please steal some at other tables. Otherwise, you can come over, get one here. Because the next part will be wisdom of the crowd. It will be chaotic. It will be chaotic, and I'm in charge to handle this. So I'm also getting nervous now. But what is the idea? Please enjoy the chaos, but also please go with me in the flow of the steps to be taken. First step is on the card. You have number 1. You see there are 4 digits there. So please, on your card, write down the 4 last digits of your phone number. It's not an easy question, the last 4 digits of your phone number. And I have to say, at the end of the exercise, you can win something. So, yeah. Then, check. Everybody did step 1? Yes. Step 2, write down on the card your key takeaway until now from this session. Or maybe you say, hey, I have another idea, or if something pops in mind, or maybe I have another experience that's really nice. So what is your key takeaway from the session until now? What would be your advice related to the topic from now? What would be your golden tip based on the session? And please write it down in the blank space. Please write it in a way that everybody else can read it, because it needs to be read within a few seconds. Please write down. And as Jane and Sunder said, it's the knowledge, the experience within the people from your daily work. That's what we like to use today, this afternoon, in this session. So please write down your best idea so that you can share it. There was one gentleman with an issue with his arm, but also writing, I see. Cool, thank you. You're a hero. Okay, if everybody wrote down his or her advice or golden tip or whatever, please stand up. And what we are going to do is move around in the room and just swap cards very quickly with everybody that you meet. So every time you only hold one card until I say stop, and then you have one card, a different card in your hands. You pair up with somebody else, and then you read cards, the both of you, and then you both have 7 points to divide on both cards. So which one is the better tip, advice, etc.? It can be 1, 0, and the other, well, cool, is 7. Can be 1, 6, it can be 2, 5, it can be 3, 4. So you have to decide after reading, discussing quickly, deciding very quickly how you value these tips. Okay, and then I have this one because I need to stop you. We want to do this 5 times, so please start moving and start swapping cards. Go, go, go. Yeah, we need a nice flow. Just start moving and swapping cards. Yeah, just swapping cards. It's a bit strange, but that's what 21st century learning is all about. And okay, please stop. Now you have a different card. Team up with somebody else. Look at both cards. What is the best tip? And score. And write your score down. Please do so. You can divide 7 points on the 2 cards. So in the example, my card has 3 here and 4 there. Total 7. Please write down your scores now. Agreed on scores. And if you did so, please move again and swap again. Keep it flowing. Everybody should be moving now again. We need this chaos. And stop again. Pair up with somebody else that's close to you and do the same exercise again. See how you value those tips on the cards. If you are alone, put your hand in the air so I can match you with somebody else. There's a gentleman over here, definitely needs a partner to discuss with. Jacco, can you talk with this person? Yeah, okay, it's all set. Okay, and please write down your scores for the second one. So everybody should have 2 scores on their card now. And if you're ready with that, you understand, start moving again. Start moving again and swap cards again. Please keep moving. Keep swapping. Does it work for you, Lizzie, to tell something about of this on the back channel? Okay, stop and pair up again with somebody else. Same again. Score again for your third score. Please do so. Okay, the third score should be on your card. And move again, swap again. And we are using a very important technology over here. It's called human interaction. Okay, everybody moving, yes. And for the fourth score, please pair up and do the same thing. 7 points divided on 2 cards. Okay, decide on your fourth score and write it down. Decide on the fourth score and please write it down on the card. And if you did so, we are doing the last round. So if you have 4 scores on the card, move again, swap again for the last round. Okay, now for the last time, pair up with somebody and decide on the last score. Please do so and write it down. Now, if it's all correct, you have 5 scores on your card. You can sit down wherever you like. And then there has to be some calculation. So then step 4 is calculate the total score of the 5 scores on your card. So please write down, calculate and write down the total score on your card. And then I need Jane and Sunder back up here on the stage, please. Okay, everybody has their score? Show me hands. Everybody ready? Okay, good. Well, now we will see what pops up as the highest score. So let's say, I will count down, let's say from 30, let's be positive. Who has 30? And I go down to 29. If you have a score, you say bingo, and then you come up to the stage. So 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22. Yeah, oh, 3 bingos. Please come over, 3 bingos, and give them a big round of applause, of course. Jane and Sunder, please, join me. Okay. First of all, congratulations to you. No, but we will handle that. That's yours, and it's your. Oh, 5 winners. Oh, gee. All 20, 22, 22. Okay. Please, can you first say who you are?
Ella Abramovich from the Council of the European Union.
Okay, thank you. And what is the tip that's on this card?
Yeah, you need to really understand the learner need from a day of life perspective.
Okay. And what are the 4 digits? Please.
0976.
0976. So who wrote down this tip? Gentlemen, please come over. What's your name?
It's Justin Max.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
For you. Okay. Then this one. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Sitka, and I work in Johnson & Johnson in Prague.
Okay. And what is on your card?
Understand the context of individuals and prepare a frame of learning strategies.
Okay. And the digits?
6587.
6587. Okay, gentleman over there. Applause. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Mauro Mercadante. I'm from Brazil. I'm from a training company over there. Thank you.
Wow, from Brazil. Cool, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Next one.
This is, my name is Irene Moorhead and I'm with PepsiCo. So this is promote continuous independent learning instead of spoon-fed learning.
Okay, sounds familiar. And what number?
It's 1908.
1908. Ah, Jacco. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Jacco van den Worp. I work in a hospital in the Netherlands.
Okay, congratulations. You know what these are, Jacco, huh? Yes, yes. We call them?
Kanjes.
Kanjers, yeah, Kanjers. Caramel cookies. Okay, the next one.
Hi, I'm Graham Hill. I'm from BP. And it's be a role model for modern workplace learning in your organization.
Okay, and who?
4477.
It's an easy one. 4477. Okay. I'm out of stroopwafels, so but there are 2 in each pack, so you should share. So the top 3 winners there. Please, your name?
Tom Ormark from Northumbria Police.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one.
Hi, my name's Mike. I'm from a company called Westcott. The tip we have here is knowing the learner's day, knowing their landscape, what are their issues?
Okay, and the number?
1919.
Oh, that's easy. Okay, lady over there, please come over. You're a winner, you should be on stage. Your name, please?
Stella.
Okay. Now, Sunder and Jane, you heard what popped up as the most valued tips or ideas. Can you please reflect on that? Please come over. Maybe
okay,
if you want to
are
ask.
we on? Yes, okay. Yeah. So, well, I was very pleased to see the one about being a role model came up there, which for me I think is really key to it all. You know, you can't, it's not about do as I say, it's about do as I do. So that's the only way you can start to influence change, is to actually be a role model. So I think that's really the place to start for me. And the other one, which was continuous learning, was it yours one? Was your one? Yeah, promote continuous learning. I mean, for me, that's really got to be it. It's got to be about not just seeing the learning as being something you do from time to time, but is just part of who you are. And, you know, it might happen for a couple of minutes a day, but recognize when it does and make the most of it. Reflect on what, if you haven't thought about, you've learned anything, just spend a few minutes every day to reflect on it. And that way you just begin to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses and where you need to go. So thank you for those 2.
Yeah. You, Sunder?
Thank you. I thought, you know, I heard a couple of people talk about context, so I'm glad that came out clearly. But I think as you sort of go down the journey, it's important to define what does context mean in your business. It's not just the physicality of where the employee is, but also in terms of what their needs are at a point in time, you know, and what does immediacy mean for that individual, which will sort of really be the trigger why they will go and learn, right? I think, so you need to sort of expand on context and not limit it to just type of content that you're going to push out. The other one is, which didn't necessarily come out, but I'll use that just to sum up and say, I think where you are is a good place to start. So don't wait for the perfect orchestration of everything coming together. So I think just start wherever you are, and you know, we can always tell a story 2 years down the line when everything looks pretty. It never is on day one, as we all know. So I think just start small, and then it just keeps, and then keep building up from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, Lizzie, you are from the Twitter team. Applause for Lizzie and the Twitter team, the back channel team. That's great what they do here at the club. Lizzie, would you be so kind to take a picture of those 5 cards and post them on the back channel? I will ask these people to bring the cards to you. If you would do that, that would be very helpful, very nice. Yes? Thank you. So please bring the card to Lizzie, and then please sit down again. Thank you so much, and great work. Well, we have some time left, so Sunder and Jane, please come over. So we have, let's say, 5 minutes, a bit more. A bit more left. There might be questions, there might be reflections, there might be whatever. So please come on stage, and one more time for you, there is time, an opportunity to ask question or whatever. So, who likes to ask a question or give a comment? Yeah, lady over here.
I really like the workflow framework, the learning at work framework. But do you think there's a danger that we might expect too much of the learner in the workplace and lose that element of formal training that we do need?
I missed that last bit.
Do we think that we might just expect too much of the learner because there's so much out there now that they can do themselves, and we lose that aspect of formal training that they do need? Because there are some things where you need formal training. But you can see on all of the graphs that I've seen today that it's falling in popularity. Is there a risk that organisations are going to say, okay, get on with it, and we don't need to do formal training anymore?
I think there'll always be a place for formal training. It's just got to be the right place. And I think once you start to support learning in other ways, then you'll find the real opportunities that training can offer. But it's probably not going to go away. But I think you need to think about the big picture. And the question that you asked, which is every individual probably need to do this because it's their life, it's their career, it's their future. It's not about this might be useful. It's this is going to be the future, and it's going to be up to everyone to realise that they need to take control of their own learning. You can't force people into doing that, but sooner or later they'll begin to realise that they're going to need to do this for themselves. How much they spend on the time a day to doing it will depend. Some people really love doing things. Some people, as you saw, some people love just for the learn just for the joy of it, while others, they're reluctant to do it. So everyone's going to be different, but it being first of all, helping people understand that it's an imperative for them in their own careers, the different ways they could do it, recognising that training is a part of it, but it's much more than that. So I think that's a role that you have to play, and don't think that it's just about providing training. It's about supporting the learning, the whole big picture.
Thank you. Who else? Who else? Last chance. In this room. Yes, lady over there.
Hello, I'm Kerry and I work for Tesco. So I wonder if you could tell me what you think the top couple of really good learning skills a colleague could have if they don't have daily access to technology. So using the internet, using the web, using our intranet isn't something that our shop floor workers can necessarily do all the time. I wonder if there's some great learning skills that you would suggest.
For the shop workers, rather than professionals. Cindy, you might be able to answer that one because you probably deal with a lot of people on the ground, really, don't you?
Yeah, so usually we don't have scenarios, so they may not have access to the internet while they're at work, but usually that's not the case when they're sort of off it, right? And what we're seeing clearly, based on data that we've looked at, is even when you provide for mobility and apps, often we see people actually consuming them beyond their work timings. It's not something that's been mandated or designed by the organization, but we're seeing a lot of salespeople, as an example, while they still have access to the internet and all of the technology, even during the regular hours, we're actually seeing them consume a lot of this content on their way back home, on a train and public transport, or just sometimes even on weekends, and without we putting any guidelines. So I think therefore the lessons that we've learned is if you're able to create an environment where people have those options, I think they figure out a way when they want to exercise it, irrespective of whether they're able to do it within what we are calling defined working hours or outside of it. And I think it's good. We should just leave that at the discretion of the employee.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to add that it's about helping them to see that their future is in their hands, and if they want to do other work, then they can find out how to do that in so many different ways, expose them to new ideas. They don't have to wait to be trained by you or anybody. They can just go out and find things, which they're doing anyway. They just don't recognise that probably as learning, and it's just helping them see that to value that as much as anything else they do.
Okay, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost at the end. And recapping, you had two real nice presentations from these experts, but then additionally you had 5 interesting conversations with these experts. and opportunity to ask questions. So I hope it will help you with the 21st century skills, and let us give them a nice round of applause. Thank you so much. One last thing. I know some of you are disappointed that you didn't win the caramel cookie. Yeah, but I have this. And I have to announce that you are all invited, sounds good, isn't it? You are all invited to the conference drinks reception, which will be held on level 2 from 5 until 6 p.m. Yep. If you would like to continue on, do you like to continue on? Yes? Okay, if you like to continue on, we are hosting networking drinks at the Fox, which is just outside the west entrance, until 8 p.m. So please send out a message. I'm not available until 8 p.m. If you would like to do that, pick up your invitation card from the reception desk on the ground floor. So let's continue the conversation with the drink. Thank you so much for being here, for paying attention, and for sharing your good knowledge with each other. Thank you.